Yeah, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this BAKE session 3, where we have Professor Amitabha Bandyopadhyay from Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. We already had this is a new series called Initiative of JMA, wherein which is called BAKE Business Acumen and Knowledge by Experts, where we invite corporate leaders and leaders from the academic institutions of repute to speak on a specific subject. So it's our pleasure having Dr. Amitabha Bandyopadhyay amongst us. I welcome, sir, and I will request everyone to please mute your camera and mic while he is speaking. At the end, we will have a question answer session where you can unmute your mic and then ask the question. I will request Ashmita to introduce the professor and take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. I am Asmita and I welcome you all on behalf of Jamshedpur Management Association. Professor Bandyopadhyay is a senior faculty at Statistical Quality Control and Operations Research Division at Indian Statistical Institute since 1982. He has been teaching statistics, quality management, and computer science for over 35 years. He has designed analytics course syllabus for different organizations like Infosys, TCS, L&T Infotech, and recently for Tata Steel. He was a statistical consultant to the senior management of Infosys Technologies Limited. Sir has carried out wide variety of practical work with union and state governments, private and public sectors. His study in estimating the quantum of counterfeit Indian currency in circulation in 2015 was widely published in national media and was reported in Parliament and in the Wall Street Journal as well. He is currently leading a team of specialists of ISI to carry out statistical studies for the Indian ordnance factories with the objective of improving level of quality and productivity. He has worked with the Delhi police and is currently involved in the analysis of road accident data to develop strategies leading to improved patrolling and better connect with trauma care facilities. He is also working with the Quality Control of India, providing assessment support for the effectiveness of large government projects like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, effectiveness of education systems in Indian schools. Professor Bandyopadhyay has special interest in formulating and solving quantitative problems for industries, businesses, and government using statistical methodologies and teaching statistics from an application perspective. Today, Sir will be sharing his expertise on possibilities and limitations of data analytics. Analytics today is equated to magic. We expect accurate predictions, whatever be the circumstances. In this session, Sir will break this myth. We will try to understand the wide array of quantitative problems, going much beyond narrowly focused predictions that can be effectively handled using analytical techniques. We will discuss about the roles of exploratory analysis and visualization. We'll talk about understanding and prediction, two very different classes of problems and their usage in practice with examples. We will discuss about the class of tools required to address the different types of problems. Finally, he'll talk about problem formulation and the crucial role it plays in providing effective solutions using the techniques of analytics. This will be a non-technical session aimed at providing insights to the participants regarding capability and limitations of analytics. It is expected that the participants will develop basic understanding about the types of analytical tools that best suit different classes of problems. They should also develop preliminary understanding about the necessary steps to be taken in the analytics journey to ensure quality of solutions and avoid major risks. The session will continue for about 70 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. With this, I welcome Professor Bandyopadhyay. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I am audible and visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So I thank you both Amitav and Asmita for introducing me, and Satish and all and JMA for this opportunity. So what today I'll be discussing about analytics, and as Smita has rightly mentioned, that I'll be talking about certain nuances. So let me begin. To start with, I'm sure you all can see the screen, right? Smita, they must be able to see the screen, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir. We are. Yeah.
Okay. So. I mean, let me first give you a brief idea about what is analytics. There are these days, as I see, a lot of myths about analytics, and I'll start with this quote from Thomas Saz. When religion was strong and science was weak, at that point of time we used to mistake magic for medicine, and now it is the other way around. Analytics is working the same way. We expect analytics to be something like magic. We expect analytics will always be able to provide us basically predictions. In fact, during the session that we will be having for about 1 hour today, I will give you a couple of examples with the current data analysis problem that is unfolding before us, namely the COVID situation. And you will see that a lot of people are coming up with a lot of different lot of different predictions, a lot of different models and things like that. So we must first of all understand that analytics is not magic. Analytics is a subject which allows us to understand variables, which allows us to understand prediction and so on. So let us see what it is. So I'll first give you some sort of a restricted view about what is meant by what is meant by analytics. Primarily, whenever you are looking at analytics, you are essentially looking at a quantitative problem. So what is the meaning of a quantitative problem? In a quantitative problem, what happens is you have a number of measured variables, and broadly there are two classes of variables. One type of variable is called a response variable, and the other type of variable is called a explanatory variable. What is a response variable? Suppose, for example, we are looking at, as of now, I mean, right now it is happening, it is unfolding before our eyes. I want to find out how many COVID cases will be there tomorrow. So the variable that I'm looking at, the variable which I'm interested in, called the response variable, is the number of COVID cases, confirmed cases. Now, I may need to do three basic things. What are those three things? Number one, I may need to understand this variable. Like you would have seen people say that it is doubling every 5 days, or it is doubling every 8 days and things like that. That is some sort of a description. So that is one thing. I may need to understand, or rather I may need to describe. Second is I may need to understand that if I have something like a lockdown, if I have some other thing, what happens? Does it increase? Does it decrease? If it increases, how much does it increase? That is called understanding or explanation. And the third possibility is that we may like to predict what will happen on the 3rd of May, what will happen on the 15th of May. These are kinds of predictions. So these are three broad types of things that we attempt to do in analytics. We want to understand, describe the behavior, we may like to understand, and we may like to predict. Now notice one important thing. When you are trying to understand, you have a response variable and you are trying to understand. So what are you trying to understand? You are trying to understand if some other variable which is expected to impact this variable, if that changes, what happens to the response? This is what you are trying to figure out. So note that whenever you are trying to understand, there is another type of variable involved, and that is called an explanatory variable. So we have something called a response variable, and we have something called an explanatory variable. And I think this basic understanding is clear. So now I have called it a restricted view, because there are other kinds of analytics as well. There are other kinds of analytics where we try to find out certain scales, or where we try to find out interrelationship between variables. We are not studying that. In this particular session, we will be talking about only a particular class, which is of course the core of analytics. And in that class, what happens? In that class, I have a response, and I am trying to understand the response. I am trying to understand how the different explanatory variables impact the response and how that could be used to predict the response. Now I will go through one. Yes, I'll go through one quick exercise. You will be getting these slides, and I suggest that you go through the exercises later on. But I will just work out one for you. The very first step in any analytics problem is to identify the response variable and to identify the explanatory variables. This is a very, very important step. If you don't do this, you will be walking into a bear trap. I mean, people might sometimes fit certain models. In many cases, it may not even make any sense. So the first step is to understand the variables. So let's take one particular case. Say, for example, a company wishes to forecast the demand. And they want to forecast the demand or predict the demand on the basis of the past and current economic conditions. The demand is one variable. You need to define what is meant by demand, how to measure it, and that will be the response variable. You are interested in knowing how the demand varies, how it behaves, you want to describe it, you want to understand, like if certain particular economic condition changes, what happens. You may like to predict that given certain particular conditions, what could be the demand. You have all these things. You have description, you have understanding, and you have predictions. Demand is your response, and the different variables, the other variables that we talked about, the economic conditions, past and current economic conditions, these are your explanatory variables. My suggestion is, we don't have time to really go through all these exercises. My suggestion is that you please try and go through these things and think yourself and possibly with your friends to find out what could be the response variables and what could be the explanatory variables. So I hope up to this the basic thing is clear. So we have defined a very core concept very, very simplistically, that in analytics one kind of view is a view where I have response variables and I have explanatory variables, and I wish to find out how the explanatory variable behaves. I may want to describe it, or I may want to understand how it changes as the explanatory variables change, and how the response changes, and how the response could be predicted for different settings of the explanatory variables. And for that, of course, we have to identify these variables right in the beginning. Now, let us get into a very, very core class of problems. This type of problem of trying to understand or predict or sometimes describe a response variable in terms of a set of explanatory variables is called supervised learning. It is called supervised learning. Why is it called supervised learning? It is called supervised learning because you try to fit a model. You try to fit a functional kind of a model. In the slide, you are seeing that there is I am trying to fit a function as y equal to f hat x. Y is the response variable, which I do not know. I want to estimate that, or I may want to predict that. And I am looking at it as a function of certain x1, x2, and so on. Actually, there is much more to it. I actually try to find out some conditional average and things like that, which we shall come to. There is a terminology, if you see on the screen, epsilon. What is that epsilon? The epsilon reminds us that the function that I am using is only an estimate, and the true value of y will not be known. I estimate it, and there could be a certain amount of variation. Epsilon gives me the quantum of the random variation. So fitting this type of a model, or fitting this kind of an equation, to be more straightforward, fitting this kind of an equation is called supervised learning, and this forms the core of business analytics. In your day-to-day work, you are often trying to fit this kind of models. You are trying to relate the response variables with the explanatory variables in terms of a model. Now let me mention one important thing here. In general, what we do is, when we are fitting this type of a function, I have written something like f hat. Actually, I should have written f with a superscript of a hat, a symbol, but that was little difficult, so I have written f hat. So this is actually f and a hat on top of the f. Why f hat? It is f hat because I really do not know this true function. One way of looking at this true function is, given a x or given a vector of x, that means I have number of explanatory variables, there is x1, x2 and so on. I am estimating y possibly by the average of y for the given x. I repeat, I am estimating y possibly by looking at the average of y for the given x. To give you an example, suppose I am trying to find out the weight of a person giving his or her height. So f hat will be, for any given height, I want to find out the corresponding average weight. That is the function. Now the true average is unknown. I am trying to estimate it, and that is why I have written f hat. We'll go more into that later. So in supervised learning, what do? We have a response, we have explanatory variables. We try to fit a function, often called a model, such that using this function, I'll be estimating. And in order to do this, I will be looking at the following data. Fitting this function is incidentally called the model fitting. And the background data will be typically a matrix. And the matrix will be like this. It will be a capital N. Suppose capital N number of observations are there, and there are small p variables, small p number of explanatory variables. So I will have a capital N cross p plus 1 matrix. Small p is for the explanatory variables and 1 for the response variable. So p plus 1 gives me the total number of variables. Capital N gives me the total number of cases. So I have a capital N by p plus 1 matrix. Given this matrix, we fit the function. That is the job we do. Sounds simple, but it can be exceedingly complex in different situations. So I hope you have got a brief understanding of what is meant by supervised analytics. So you have understood what is meant by response and explanatory variables, and then we are trying to estimate the response variable from the explanatory variable. Typically the estimate is made by looking at the conditional averages. What is the conditional average? Given certain value of x, I want to find out the average of y. That is the conditional average. So these conditional averages constitute my model, and there can be two broad kinds which we shall be talking about shortly. We fit that model. Now there can be many alternative models. Many alternative models. I will take you through all of that, and there you will be seeing the different possibilities and the different limitations as well. Now for the time being, assume that you have certain alternative models. So for example, you are fitting, say you are trying to figure out how to estimate the weight of a person given his or her height. So you could have fitted many different models. One possible model is I look at the weight simply as a linear function of height, or I may look at the weight as a quadratic function of height, or whatever it may be. So these are different ways to estimate. Now I want to find out of a possible set of candidate models, which model is really better. I want to find out which model is really better. How do I do that? For that, what I do is I divide my entire data into three broad parts, namely the training data, the validation data, and the test data. Training data is the data on which the model will be fitted. It is roughly about 50%, but there is no hard and fast rule. The remaining data, which are divided into validation and testing, one part is called validation. We will often use the fitted models on the validated data and thereby calibrate the model and choose a set of alternative models. And finally, the chosen models, a few selected models which are competitors of each other, will be tested on the test data to figure out which particular model really fits the situation better. Okay, so this is how we will be carrying out the model fitting. So up to this, we have understood. We have a rough understanding of the response and explanatory variables, of the role of supervised analytics, which fits the model. A basic understanding that model fitting essentially entails finding out conditional averages of response, which is often called Y, as conditioned on the explanatory variables. That means average of Y given X's. Now there is one important point, and then also we have seen, we have also seen that once models are developed, we need to actually test them and validate them. We train the model on certain particular data set and test it or validate it on some other data set, and finally test candidate models on a different data set. That is how we choose a model. Now the question is, when I actually now we will say, when we actually measure, when we are actually measuring the X and Y, how do I measure? What could be the different scales of measurement? That is another important point to understand. There are typically four scales of measurement. And these four scales of measurements are called nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio scales of measurement. What are these scales? Nominal scale is one in which we only have a name, we only have a level. There is no implicit order. Let me give you an example. Suppose in a particular organization, I am figuring out whether certain particular items produce a defective or not. Suppose there are two machines, machine 1 and machine 2, and I wish to find out what proportion of items are defective in machine 1 and what proportion of items are defective in machine 2. Now note that any particular item could be defective or non-defective. That is being measured 0 or 1. That is the response variable. And the explanatory variable is the machine. I have machine name, maybe A or B. Now this machine name is a nominal variable. Given A, the proportion defective may be low or the proportion defective may be high. Okay. So when I only have a name, I have machine name, I want to know how many COVID cases will be there in state A or state B or state C. So the explanatory variable is the state. The response variable is the number of cases. Explanatory variable is the state name. It is a nominal variable. The next type of variable that we measure, by next type I mean a variable which has slightly more information, nominal variables of the least information. We have something called an ordinal variable. You go to a restaurant, though it is difficult these days, but you go to a restaurant and you let us say grade the food. You may say that the food is very good, and on a 5-point rating you may give a rating of 5 or 4, or it may be very bad, you could have given a rating of 1. Here is a measurement when you give grades like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice that these are not numbers. Although I have written them as numbers, but these are not numbers because 2 minus 1 is not equal to 5 minus 4. However, we know that 2 is greater than 1. This kind of a measurement scale is called a ordinal scale. This has slightly more information than nominal scale. Nominal and ordinal scale together forms the so-called categorical data or categorical scale. And then we have 2 other scales, interval and ratio. The ratio scale is the scale which we come across very often. This is a continuous measure or a count data, and the 0 is non-arbitrary. Ratios are meaningful. Like, say, for example, I can find out the length of a particular length of some item. I can find out time and so on. These are measured on ratio scale. So if I know that the time taken to travel from A to B is 1 hour and time taken to travel from C to D is 2 hours, I know that C to D takes twice as much time to travel as A to B. So the ratio makes sense. Sometimes we may have continuous data, like, say, for example, temperature, which could be measured in centigrade scale or Fahrenheit scale. Notice that in this case, the 0 is arbitrary. So ratio does not make sense. So this kind of scale is called interval scale. So these are the 4 different types of scales. And whenever you are looking at a particular situation, you should try to understand what scale you are using to measure the data. I've given a couple of examples which are easy to understand. Notice another important point in the analytics scenario. You will mostly, or in supervised analytics, you will typically come across 2 types of problems: classification problem and value estimation problem. In classification problem, the response variable is ordinal or nominal, essentially categorical. And in value estimation problem, the response variable will be ratio or interval, mostly ratio. I may try to find out how many COVID positive cases will be there on 3rd May. And that is a value estimation problem. The Y is a ratio scale variable. So we have understood what is the response variable, what is the explanatory variable. We have understood that relating them is the job of the supervised analytics. And while carrying out supervised analytics, we fit functional models. And these functional models usually are conditional averages. That is a rather simplistic way of looking at things. And this Y and X, that means the response variable and the explanatory variables, may be measured either in ratio scale or in interval scale or in categorical scales like ordinal and nominal scales. We have understood these scales. I'm sure you will be able to categorize. At the end of the session, there are certain review questions. We'll go through that for 5 minutes. Now there are 2 different types of methods: the parametric method and the non-parametric method. You have heard about terms like artificial intelligence. You have heard about terms like machine learning. The machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms are typically non-parametric algorithms. Let me try to distinguish between parametric and non-parametric methods, and it is a very, very crucial understanding. You need to be able to distinguish between them, and you need to know which one should be ideally used in which particular scenario. Within a parametric method, what happens is we presuppose the functional form. I already told you that when we are fitting the model or the functional form, we are typically looking at the conditional average of Y given X. Now in parametric model, we may assume that these conditional averages have certain particular predefined form. A broadly assumed predefined form is a linear form. The example that I've given over here, fx equal to beta naught plus beta 1x plus x1 plus beta 2 x2 and so on, is a linear form. So here we are assuming that the conditional expectation of Y or conditional average of Y given X is a reasonably good linear function of x1, x2 and so on. It is not necessary that we will be looking at only linear functions. We may look at nonlinear functions. We may look at polynomials. We may look at logarithmic functions and things like that. All those models will come under a broad class of linear models. This is linear in parameters. So, without going into the technicality, there is a broad class of models in which we presuppose a functional form, and then we find out this model parameters. This beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, and so on that you are seeing are the different parameters. This kind of a model fitting is called a parametric model fitting. Now, on the other hand, you have something called non-parametric model fitting. What is a non-parametric fitting? In a non-parametric model fitting, what happens is you do not assume any specific functional form. I am sure that most of you have done some amount of analytics work. That is why you are in this particular session group. So you must have used certain particular methodologies as well. You might have used methodologies like a tree-based model, or you might have used methodologies like k-nearest neighbor. Notice that when we use a linear function and fit something like a linear regression model, we are assuming that the conditional averages of y follows is a linear function of x1, x2, and so on. We are presupposing a functional form. Whereas in tree, we are not presupposing any such form. In k-nearest neighbor, we are not presupposing any such form. So in a non-parametric method, what happens is I relax the assumption of a presupposed form, and I try to estimate the conditional average of y for various different sets of x. So this is what is called a non-parametric. Now there are advantages. I think this basic distinction is clear. The parametric model presupposes a form. The non-parametric model does not assume anything. The non-parametric model simply takes from the data whatever forms whatever are the conditional averages, and there are many different ways to compute these conditional averages. And accordingly, you have many different types of non-parametric models, broadly often called as artificial intelligence methods or machine learning methods. So this is the broad difference. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Notice that the non-parametric approach does not presuppose any form. Non-parametric approach in many cases may not even may not make any statistical assumption like y will follow this distribution, etc., etc. So non-parametric methods may come with much lesser baggage. That is one. And another important point is because there is no functional form presupposed. So as a result, what happens is the model that you fit is likely to be very, very flexible. If you fit a linear model, you are fitting a hyperplane. In case you have only one variable, you are fitting a straight line. But when you are fitting a non-parametric model, there is no presupposed form. It can take any kind of form. So it can be very, very wiggly and things like that. So as a result, the non-parametric approach will usually have a better predictive accuracy. Will often have a better predictive accuracy. Not necessarily, but will often have a better predictive accuracy. This is the advantage. What are the disadvantages? There are two disadvantages. Number one, the non-parametric models often turn out to be black box models. So you really do not know. You might be making prediction well, but you do not know whether the prediction will be okay tomorrow or not. You do not know which particular variable really was important. So understanding the background scenario will not come. That is one disadvantage of non-parametric. Of course, there are certain methods in which you can assess the importance of variables and things like that, but it is done much better in a parametric. This is one important point. Second important point in non-parametric approach is because the non-parametric method is picking up, is understanding from the data, is learning from the data, there is a possibility that it will pick up nuances of the data. And it may pick up certain variables which are not important at all. But for some reason in this particular data, in this particular data set, it has worked. So for example, there is a joke that in a particular area, in a particular area, some photographs were being classified, and it was found that in some snow-capped area, the classification accuracy was very, very good. And suddenly the classification accuracy reduced. It was because in the snow-capped area, in some particular case, there was pictures of some particular birds, which is not seen elsewhere. And because of that bird, the accuracy went up. But that is not necessarily true in other areas, and therefore the model did not function well later on. So these kinds of problems are possible in a non-parametric approach. This risk is called overfitting. We will talk about that a little bit in a greater detail later. So in a nutshell, non-parametric methods are typically better for predictive problems. They are generally more accurate as far as prediction is concerned, but there are two difficulties. Number one, their interpretability is lower, and there is a risk of overfitting, meaning that risk of picking up certain particular nuances of data, which works for a while but may not work tomorrow. Now, on the other hand, you have something called the parametric approach, in which you presuppose a form. So the presupposition of the form in many cases may come from your substantive knowledge, from your knowledge of engineering, from your knowledge of medical sciences. You may know that this particular X variable is likely to be linearly related, or may likely to be having a quadratic relationship with Y and things like that. So you can figure in, or you can factor in your existing knowledge when you are using a parametric approach. That is one advantage. You can figure out if some certain particular variable has become important or did not become important. You can ask a question from a theoretical perspective, from a substantive perspective. That is an advantage of the parametric. The disadvantage is that you are presupposing, and therefore you are highly restricted in many cases, and therefore your predictive accuracy may not be very good. So that is the disadvantage of parametric. Now, often in a realistic scenario, you will have to use both non-parametric model as well as parametric model. Let me give you one example. Suppose I am trying to figure out the risk factors of some disease, say heart disease. Now, if you are a doctor, you may be interested in understanding. You may be interested in understanding what will happen if I change my lifestyle like this, or if my weight goes up like this, and so on and so forth, if my age goes up like this. So as a doctor, you would like to understand more. You are not so interested in predicting probably. But suppose you are a life insurance company who sells insurances for people, insurances for various different illnesses and things like that. In that case, you are not so interested in understanding the relationship between my lifestyle and my risk. You are more understanding in finding out if so many people are there, how many could probably claim. So you are probably more interested in prediction. Basically similar problem, but you may require to some extent understanding, and in another case you may require prediction. So parametric and non-parametric both will be playing role, and as an analyst you have to understand what you want to do. So having understood this, let us now go for two broad views. I will not go into much depth of this. There are two broad views of model fitting. One is, the linear model is on one extreme. It is a parametric model, and it is a mainstay of many statistical models and things like that. And on the other extreme of model fitting is the nearest neighbor model, where we make no assumption. We just have the data, and any new x variable, if I were to find out what will be the corresponding y or which class it will belong to, I simply take k nearest neighbors. I simply take k nearest neighbors and look at the corresponding known y's and try to use that average of that or whatever it may be to estimate the value of y. The nearest neighbor algorithm, if you think a little bit, the nearest neighbor algorithm is very similar to our own understanding of reality. I hear your accent and I say that, well, maybe you are a Bengali, because I have seen so many Bengalis speaking English or Hindi like this, and therefore you would be that. So notice that here I am trying to use my past experience and fitting it to the nearest neighbors. So these are two different views of model fitting. Notice that the linear model is a parametric model and the other model is a non-parametric model. So I hope you have understood the basics of parametric and non-parametric model, and when the parametric model may be used and when the non-parametric model may be used. Please remember that non-parametric model is generally more useful for predictive problems and parametric models are generally more useful for explanatory problems. I'll now get into the greater detail of these broad classes of problems. But before that, let me just tell you three different classes of errors when you are actually looking at three different the types of errors and validation of models and so on. Let me just try and look at that. So you have understood this broad classification. Now, suppose you have fitted a model. Suppose for the same data, you've got a particular data. You have now understood what is meant by training data, what is meant by validation data, and what is meant by test data. You might have fitted a parametric model or certain alternative parametric models, and you might have fitted or one or more non-parametric models. So, for example, in order to estimate the value of y, you have fitted, let us say, linear regression model. You might have fitted, let us say, a tree-based model. You might have fitted a k-nearest neighbor model, and like that. So you might have fitted 3-4 different models. And you would now like to see how these models are compared. Which model is better, which model is worse, and so on. And then out of them, you'll be choosing one model. As we have stated that you first have used the training data to fit the model. Having fitted the model, you will now use the validation data. Notice that the validation data was not seen when the model was fitted. Now you have fitted 4 or 5 different models. And these 4 or 5 different models, you are now checking on the validation data. So you are checking if the same linear regression fitted on the training data is used to estimate the y values in the validation set, how does it work? Or the rules that you have developed using a tree-based model on the training data, if you use it on the validation data, how does it work? So over there, you may fine-tune the model. You may choose certain particular variables, you may drop certain particular variables, you may take certain squares of variables, etc., etc. So you may make certain changes. So the validation is the first cut tuning. You tune and you find out which particular model is best in parametric set, which particular model is best, or maybe a few alternative competitors in the parametric set, a few alternative competitors in the non-parametric set. And then what you do is you use it on the test data, these 4 or 5 finally chosen models. And whichever model performs best, you use. Here I will just mention one point, that whenever you are assessing a particular model, you use something called the mean squared error. You use something called the mean squared error. It is used for the value estimation problem, not for classification problem. In classification problem, you use proportion of misclassification or certain other measures. Proportion of misclassification is not necessarily a good measure. There are other measures, but it will be complex to discuss that. So let me just quickly discuss mean squared error. The mean squared error is an error where you have estimated, so your y hat, as we have seen, you have used the f hat as the estimated estimator function. You have used that to arrive at y hat. The y hat is, you were telling that if x1, x2, x3 is given, this is my estimated value, y hat. The actual observed value is some y. So y minus y hat gives you the error. You square them, add them, and take the average. That is called the mean squared error. Obviously, if the mean squared error is low, your model is better. If the mean squared error is high, then the model is not so good. So this, you first use the training data, check the model and fine tune the model using the mean square error. Use it on the validation data, see how the mean square error is, check certain alternative models, and then select one. Like that, from different classes, you select some models. So you have 3 or 4 selected models. Use all of them on the test data, and then find out what is there. So this is basically the way you go. So I think that part is understood clearly. So notice how we are traversing. We are selecting variables, identifying the response and explanatory variables, selecting variables, identifying their measurement scales, making sure that they are appropriately measurable. And then we are trying to figure out a particular model. The model is some f hat or something like that, which is primarily conditional averages. And then there are parametric ways and non-parametric ways. Within them, there are various different methods. We choose alternative models, and then these alternative models we are first checking on the training data, then on the validation data, and finally on the test data to figure out how things are. Now, in this entire scenario, there is one important concept called the concept of overfitting. And this is very, very important because particularly the complex non-parametric models, the so-called AI models or the so-called machine learning models are very prone to overfitting unless you are careful. There are just to name a couple of things. So, for example, if you are using if you're boosting a tree, there is every likelihood of an overfitting unless you are careful. If you are just fitting a tree and you are allowing it to grow, it grows very, very large. There is every possibility of overfitting. So, like that, there are possibilities of overfitting. So, we need to understand what that means. If you find if you look at this picture, it will become clear. As the complexity of the model increases, what is complexity? Complexity is nothing but your this one, the training error. Complexity is nothing but the number of variables. I have large number of variables. I have many different there are logarithms, complex variables, and things like that. In a tree, I have large number of variables. A tree with huge depth and things like that. These are complex models. Large number of variables, large number of parameters estimated. So these kind of things are called complex models. Complex models will be more flexible generally because it does not have any form. It can be very, very wiggly. So it can estimate practically any function. These models, as the complexity increases, the training error for these models will keep decreasing. In some cases, the training error can be close to zero. On the training data, you may find that you are estimating accurately. So it will be almost like astrological predictions. So it could be like that. Now, what could happen is you will find that beyond a particular complexity, the test error keeps increasing. Look at this graph. You will find that up to some complexity, the test error has been decreasing, and then after some time, the test error increases. That is the point. That is the turning point. That is the point when any further addition of complexity is likely to introduce more of overfitting. You should be careful about that. Overfitting is a very, very important thing and could be very dangerous, because an overfitted model may look very good when you look at the training data, but may fall flat tomorrow. So now we have understood how a model is to be fitted and what is really meant by this model fitting. The basic understanding of model fitting is probably there. And we have understood these two broad classes of problems as well. Now note that this complexity and flexibility I have just now explained. In a parametric setup, parametric setups are typically less complex. If you have 10 variables, and let us say 10,000 observations, you have 10 variables. If you fit a linear model, you will notice that you will have beta naught plus beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, etc., beta 10. So you have only 11 parameters. But if you are fitting a tree-based model or a nearest neighbor model, depending on the data size and things like that, you may have very large number of observations, a very large number of parameters. If you allow the tree to go deep, you may have for 10 different variables. If a binary tree may have 1,000 different leaf nodes. And for each leaf node, you may estimate an average, which is a parameter. So as the complexity increases, as the flexibility increases, complexity also increases, which we have discussed. Now I will introduce. So we have understood model fitting broadly. What is model fitting and the risks of model fitting? We have understood that a complex model, a complex non-parametric model, could probably give you a good prediction on the training data, but may fail to give good prediction in the long run, and that is because of overfitting. So we should be clear. We should always do a very thorough check. We should always take the training data, validation data, test data, and so on. And also there is another way to check called the cross validation, which requires far more discussion. So I did not get into that, but that also needs to be used. And you could read up from many different sources. That also needs to be used to check that there is the overfitting is not there. So these are some of the basic things that you need to take care of. Now we come to another important point. Whenever you are fitting, whenever you are actually trying to solve a problem, you're fitting certain particular models and things like that, you will come across three types of errors: irreducible, bias, and variance. Let me explain to you particularly the irreducible error, because this is source of many troubles. Notice, just recall that I have told in the beginning of this session, I have mentioned that the f hat, the function which we are using to estimate the value of y, what is that? That is essentially a conditional average of y given x's. So given that my x1, x2, x3 is so on, this, what will be the corresponding value of y? I am estimating it by average. I am estimating that by average. Okay. Now around that average, there will be certain amount of variation. That is called a conditional variance. Around that average, there will be certain amount of variation, that is called a conditional variance. Now, what does this conditional variance mean? The conditional variance basically means that given a set of x's, what will be the variability of y? This error is irreducible. Whatever model you fit, if you have chosen x1, x2, and x3, whatever be the model, given x1 is some value, x2 has taken some value, and x3 has taken some value, if y varies by so much, that variability cannot be reduced any further. That is the irreducible error. In the regression context, in parametric models and in statistics, in the regression context, this is called pure error. You should be very careful about pure error. If the underlying irreducible error itself is large, if the underlying irreducible error or the underlying pure error itself is large, you can do only that much. if the expectation of your customer is to move beyond the irreducible error, you will never be able to do it. So it is important to understand this, and it is important to set the expectation right. Analytics is no magic, as we told right in the beginning. And as we are looking at the limitations, this is one major limitation. It is a major technical limitation. Given certain values of x1, x2, x3, if my y has so much of variation, I can do no better than that. So please make sure that you understand this point, because if you are asked to predict accurately, and often in a realistic scenario you may be asked to predict within plus minus 3%, 2%, or things like that, whatever it may mean. This is a requirement often. But if your irreducible error is larger than that, you will never be able to do it. So this is one major type of error which requires understanding and which requires estimation. You need to estimate that. How will you estimate? We will see a little bit. It is difficult to estimate, but in regression context, if you do not have too many variables, your software like R and things like that may help you in estimating this. You may search for pure error or irreducible error. Pure error will be a good search. The other two things are called bias and variance, and there is something called a bias variance trade-off. Sometimes I may introduce a little bit of bias. That means on an average, my model may not predict very accurately. There will be a certain amount of bias. I mean, from the true value, it may differ by some amount. Often you may consider it to be something like a zero error kind of thing. So there will be a certain amount of bias. We may introduce a little bit of bias to reduce variance of the estimation. Anyway, that the bias variance trade-off is a concept that we need to go into. That is fairly a little bit more complex and may not be so important right at this point of time. What is more important is to understand the irreducible error part, because that often makes a difference between, that often makes your customer happy or unhappy, and you need to understand what is really the capability of your model given the data. So I hope you have understood the concept of irreducible error. Bias is the average difference of the true value, and variance is the variance of the particular function that you have estimated. There is a lot that we can play with the bias and variance, but more about that maybe if we happen to talk some other time. Maybe we'll be discussing that later on. Now I will get into the last section, and that is the types of immersion, the types of learning, the supervised learning programs. There are three broad types of learning programs: exploratory, explanatory, and predictive. We have already discussed about explanatory and predictive, though I'll be touching upon once more. Exploratory analytics is the first step that you must start with. And in fact, once you start with the exploratory step well, if you have identified your response and explanatory variables well, if you have understood the scales of measurement, and if you have put the data properly in the matrix format, that capital N by P plus 1 matrix format as we have discussed about, if all these things have been done, and if you clean the data properly, then the exploratory analytics can add very, very great amount of insight. In exploratory analytics, we look at conditional average, conditional proportion or probability, conditional rate, or conditional variance. I will give you a couple of examples, and that will make things clearer to you. Suppose you are examining the road accidents in Delhi, and suppose you find that in Delhi, about 25% of the recorded accidents are hit and run accidents. We know that a hit and run accident is one in which a vehicle has hit someone and vanished. So no one knows what the kind of vehicle is, and typically people did not observe the accident, and therefore it will take longer time to aid the victim, and therefore the death rate etc. also are higher. So obviously one concern of the Delhi police is to reduce the hit and run cases. we find overall 25% of the recorded accidents are hit and run. What kind of exploratory analysis shall we carry out? Notice that we will be looking at conditional proportions in this case. We may look at the conditional, the 25% is the overall proportion in Delhi. Maybe in certain particular road, maybe in outer ring road, it is 32%. Maybe in outer ring road, at a particular point of time, maybe in the night, some 3 hours or 4 hours, it is even more than that. It is maybe 40%. So this is what is exploratory analytics. In exploratory analytics is often called a level 1 analysis. We don't make any assumptions. We not do it fit non-parametric model, but we use non-parametric methodologies. We take the data and we look at the data from various different perspectives. Typically by using conditional proportions, conditional averages, and like that. Say you are looking at, say, death rate for COVID-19 patients. The current death rate in India is, let's say, about 3%. How do we explore? We may like to see how does the rate change across various different age brackets. We may like to see how does it differ at different age brackets and genders. How does it differ across different states? How does it differ across various different other kinds of diseases, pre-existing diseases? So this gives us an insight about the underlying scenario. Description. Please remember that right in the beginning I talked about we have a response variable, we describe it. Exploratory analysis describes. This is the starting point. The exploratory analytics will tell you which variables are probably more important, which variables are less important, how much is the variation, what could be the extent of irreducible error or pure error. These are kinds of questions which you will get answers from if you carry out your exploratory analytics appropriately. But this is a painstaking job, and as an analyst it is your responsibility. To think about the problem, look at the response variable, look at the explanatory variables, formulate your questions, and then try to do the exploratory analytics. It is, I tell you, this is going to be a very, very rewarding exercise if you do it appropriately. Now we have come almost to a close. So there are two other types of analytics called explanatory and predictive. We talked about these cases. Explanatory is for understanding, typically parametric models. We fit a parametric model to understand out of these x1, x2, x3 variables, which variable is more important. Which variable will impact me positively? Which variable will impact me negatively? What does that mean? Say for example, you are estimating some y. You have two variables, x1 and x2, and you have created a linear model. Beta naught plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 into x2. Suppose beta 1 is negative. What does it tell you? If beta 1 is negative, it tells you that if you increase x1, y will decrease. And if beta 2 is positive, it will tell you if you increase x2, y will increase. The beta 1 and beta 2 will also tell you something about the quantum of increase. So this is what is explanation. I am understanding the background scenario and I am understanding it quantitatively. So this is one kind of analytics. And the other kind of analytics is the so-called predictive analytics. In that, I want to know what will be the value of y. I don't care whether x1 is more important or x2 is more important. As I told you the alternative views, one view adopted by an insurance company and the other view adopted by a doctor. The doctor wants to understand what impacts the patient. The insurance company wants to know how much money I will pay. Right? That is a predictive analytics. So these are in a predictive analytics, you will typically be using the flexible methods. You will typically be using the AI methods and things like that. Of course, in some cases, parametric methods will work well, but you will typically use the AI or that kind of method. However, make sure that you don't fall into the trap of overfit. So these are some examples. And I'm very sure that you can look at you can think about exploratory analytics in your case as well in your organization. A medical researcher wants to know the importance of different factors that impact a particular disease and things like that. An investor wants to understand which economic variable impact the performance of certain specific industry sectors and so on. These are examples of explanatory analytics. So these areas like which predictors are associated and things like that we have already discussed quite a lot. So I will not get into the details of this. We will be probably discussing that later if we have some time. I need to stop now. And examples of predictive analytics are you are estimating maybe defects. You are finding out one very important thing is suppose there is a credit card transaction and you are trying to find out whether a card transaction is fraudulent. So in such a case, as someone is swiping a card or someone is making a purchase online, the bank will have to determine whether this is a fraudulent transaction. That has to come very quickly and that has to be very accurate. In such cases, you will typically figure out you'll typically use a predictive analytics. So I hope we have understood the basics. We have understood the basics. There is only one basic lesson that we need to that we need to figure out. You need to be clear about. We have discussed enough of that, so I don't think there will be much confusion. But once we go through the questions, it will be more easily understood. So depending on the ultimate goal of inference, you may either use predictive or explanatory or a combination of the two. We have understood this, and we have understood the advantages and disadvantages of parametric and non-parametric model, flexible and less flexible model, the impact of complexity and so on. So this part, I'm sure you have got a reasonable understanding. So now my time is over. I have taken probably about 1 hour, so I will just ask you a few questions, and you may go through this. I think Ashmita, we can probably allow people to just go through these questions quickly and then in 5-6 minutes they respond, and followed by that I can take questions.
Okay, sure, sir.
These review questions, I suggest that we have been talking for about 1 hour, so I give the participants about 5-6 minutes to just go through this quickly and see whether they are able to listen. I need to change it, right? They cannot, isn't it?
Yeah. So the questions are visible right now, so maybe they can go through them. Let's give them 5 minutes.
Yeah, there are 3 pages, so each page may be 2 minutes.
Okay, all right.
And Ashmita, please, in case somebody has any issue in these questions, if they have not understood, hopefully, I mean, I have tried to construct it in a manner that these questions, on the basis of whatever I have talked, people should be able to answer these questions. They should feel comfortable. Okay. If they're not, let them come back to me or to you. Okay?
Yeah, no problem. So if the questions are not clear to anybody, they can unmute themselves and ask Professor directly, or leave your doubt in the chat box.
So page 1 is very straightforward. I hope everybody has understood. Question number 2, let me quickly give you answer. Weight of a person in kilogram is a ratio scale variable. Socioeconomic status of a person, a 3-point scale is a ordinal variable. Calendar year is a interval variable. Gender is a nominal variable, and health risk measured in 1 to 10 scale is an ordinal variable. So let me move to the next one. Are you all feeling comfortable?
I request the participants to please respond.
Oh, people have answered certain these things. Huh? Like,
A would be non-parametric.
okay. A would be non-parametric. Correct. Anyway, see, we will not be discussing in very great detail right now. I just, I mean, I just want to make sure that all of you are reasonably comfortable with this. Someone has asked whether the PPT can be shared. Yes, of course it can be shared. Please, I think Ashmita will give you that. It will definitely be shared. So these review questions you are reasonably comfortable with, isn't it? So let us see whether we are understanding the basic. I mean, the overall summary I am not going through because that will take another 15-20 minutes. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, you may ask.
Okay, so thank you, sir. The session is open for question and answers. So please unmute yourselves and ask them one by one.
Yeah, so Ashmita Ravijan here. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sir, you talked about that point where we are overfitting the data to the model. So
Correct.
how to identify that point that we are overfitting the data to the model? What is that point and how to identify it?
You select models A, B, C, and like that. Say for example, you select you are fitting, let us say, regression model, and you choose a particular function. Okay, then make the function more complex. So you have 3 or 4 alternative models. As the function is more complex, your complexity is increasing, and the flexibility is increasing, but the interpretability is reducing. Now check for each one of these things as in the order of increase of complexity, whether the test error is increasing or not. Whenever you are finding that the training error is lower but the test error is higher, that particular model is overly complex and should be discarded. So that will be true for a non-parametric model as well. So suppose, for example, you are using something like a tree-based model, and you have chosen certain variables and a particular depth. If you find or in a boosting, you have chosen a certain amount of refinement. Beyond the point, if you find that the test error is increasing, then that is the cutoff point.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Professor,
good afternoon. This is TLN Acharya.
Please.
So, just one question. There are 2 types of tests, non-parametric and parametric. And in parametric, say 2 sample t test and say ANOVA. In non-parametric test, the equivalents are Mann-Whitney U test and Kruskal-Wallis test. In case of parametric test, you will get a definite band of operating range of the parameters for hypothesis test. Whereas in case of non-parametric test, it simply says based on the p-value whether it is whether you reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis, but it is not giving us any band of operating ranges of the parameters. So in case of non-parametric test, how to get this kind of band? Similar to either ANOVA or 2 sample t tests.
This question actually we have not addressed. We did not talk about test of hypothesis. I have talked about non-parametric model fitting, not non-parametric hypothesis testing.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, since you have raised this question, you are probably talking about, when you are talking about the band, you are probably talking about what is called a confidence interval.
Yes,
Now,
yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah.
Whenever you are making a confidence interval, there are 2 ways. if you want to make a parametric confidence interval, you have to assume a distribution. And from that distribution, often a normal distribution is assumed, or sometimes a transformation is taken and the transform variable is considered to be normal. And then using that, we find out the confidence interval. In a non-parametric case, you will have to use something like a bootstrap. You will have to resample several times, and then you have to generate a non-parametric interval accordingly. But that was not covered in this particular course. I was talking about the models which are parametric and non-parametric. Regression model, when the functional form is known, is a parametric model. Tree-based model is a non-parametric model. No functional form is specific.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So I have a very basic question. While in a parametric model, we end up with an equation, which is which you put as beta x1, beta 2, x2, x1, all that. In a non-parametric model, what I'm not able to grasp well is, will you still end up with an equation, or how will the model look like?
In a non-parametric model, in most cases, equation will not be there. In a non-parametric model is basically procedural. A non-parametric model tries to figure out I have told you that the core of modeling is finding out the conditional averages. So in a parametric model, the conditional averages are assumed to have certain particular shape, and accordingly the model is fitted. In non-parametric, the conditional averages are excluded separately. So that is why it does not have any specific closed form functional form, like a linear form or a quadratic form.
So how will it get defined at the end of the day, which such that it can be used for multiple data in future too?
It can be used. Think about a tree-based model. What does the tree-based model give you? It gives you a rule. It tells you, suppose you have x1, x2, x3. Suppose you are looking at certain particular person and judging the risk of certain particular. Say you are looking at a particular person and judging the risk of default. Suppose you are a bank. Okay, you have taken a loan and you are trying to judge the risk of default. So you have looked at, let us say, 3 or 4 variables. You have looked at my income, you have looked at my age, you have looked at the type of business I am in, etc. Okay. Now you have decided about rules. If x1 is like this, if x2 is like that, and if x3 is like that, then I'm a good risk. If x1 is like this, x2 is like that, x3 is like this, then I am a moderate risk, and so on. So there is nothing like an increasing function, decreasing function, or like that. Given a particular set of questions, there is.
Okay.
So what is the background method you make whenever you are making trees and things like that? Whenever you are making nearest neighbor algorithms, you are using this kind of model.
Okay. So it's a kind of a format that you have to be subjected to. Okay.
Sir, there is a question in the chat box by Mr. Samagra Kumar. Which tool is more useful out of these in finding the variable of importance? Correlation heat map, feature importance is using feature importance correct if model is not performing well, like having R underscore 2 of point.
I can't see this. That is, how is it? Okay, anyway, you please read it once more. Which tool is more important in?
Which tool is more useful out of these in finding the variable of importance? Correlation heat map, feature importance, and is using feature importance correct if model is not performing well? I've also posted the question again in the chat box. In just a moment.
Which tool is more useful out of these in finding the importance of variables? Correlation heat map, feature importance, is using feature importance correct if model is not performing well. Okay. Well, now this question actually has several different parts. So let me try to explain to you. Correlation will give you certain idea. correlation heat map will essentially identify those particular variables which are reasonably highly correlated. Now, correlation, unfortunately, is not a very good way. That is because correlation typically measures the linear relationship. It does not measure any kind of relationship. So what you should do instead of correlation, my suggestion will be use measures of association. Try constructing two-way, three-way, or four-way contingency tables and try to figure out the measure of association. There are 5 coefficients. You can find out the odds ratios, relative risks, and like that. That will give a better understanding, and that will enable you to capture the relationship if there is any association, whether the association is a linear association or the association is a non-linear association. In either case, it will be able to capture. So rather than correlation, try to use contingency tables. Second important point is, before going to feature importance, when you are looking at correlation, prior to correlation, you are typically probably constructing the scatter diagrams, and you are probably plotting a scatter plot matrix also. My suggestion is that scatter plot matrix for large data often turn out to have certain. I mean, a lot of dots will come in one particular area, and you will find it is very difficult to really decipher any pattern out of that. So in such cases, try fitting simple non-parametric regressions. Like you could fit something called a Lewis model. That will tell you that is basically something like a mean function plot, a little bit sophisticated, more sophisticated than that, and that will give you some idea about which particular variable is typically having a higher impact. The slope of the curve will give some indication of the impact. So to respond to the first question, the correlation heat map, instead of correlation heat map, try using the contingency tables, chi-square analysis, 5 coefficients, and more. Even better will be if you can use let's say odds ratios or relative risks and things like that. And second is plot scatter diagrams and fit simple non-parametric models like Lewis. Now the second point is whether feature importance is correct if no model is not performing well. Actually, this question should be put exactly the other way around. We first select the features and then use these features for fitting the model. So if the model is not performing well, there is a possibility. There are 2 possibilities. One possibility is that I have not fitted the right features, the variables at all. Now, if my initial list of variables itself does not contain that, then there is nothing that I can do. There are sometimes situations where I do have the variables, but I may need to take an appropriate combination of those variables to understand an appropriate combination of variables which I might have missed out. Again, this is a complex scenario. This is a complex scenario. Before you get into model performance, do the exploratory analysis. One kind of exploratory analysis in which you will be probably putting different variables together is to use things like principal component error. Principal component will tell you something about combination of variables. Now, interpretation of the combination of variables and things like that may not be necessarily very easy. So this second question requires more discussion, but my suggestion will be that you definitely do the exploratory analytics as I've suggested. Definitely do those 2 parts, the contingency table analysis and the scatter plots with Lewis or that kind of non-parametric curve. And then for multiple variables, try looking at the principal components, take possibly certain subsets, find out the different principal components, and then try fitting models with different principal components and try seeing how it works. So this will be a step-by-step approach.
Okay, I hope that answers his question. We have one more question from Mr. Omkar Shinde. He asked, how do we construct a good training data set?
How do you construct a good training data set? Well, this is a $1 million question. How do you construct you don't construct a training data set. You need to actually collect the data. So see, there are issues. What will be a good training data? Again, this is an area which we did not address. What will be a good training data? You are collecting certain particular data, and using this particular data, you are fitting a model, and you are then extrapolating that model into the test data. Okay. So constructing a good training data set is a question that really cannot be answered, but you should be careful as an analyst with respect to the following things. Let me give you one very basic concept. There is a concept of a study population and a target population. What is the study population? Study population is your training data. You are collecting data from somewhere. And what is the target population? Target population is the population for which you are making the prediction. One example will probably clarify the matter. Think about psephological predictions. In a psephological prediction, suppose I have taken a sample on the basis of the voter list. And on the basis of that, I have gone to certain people and I have sampled them. And I have got their opinion. They have casted their vote in the ballot box. And I believe that they have casted their vote in the right manner. Now note that the target population is the population who have voted. I want to know their voting percentage. Now in the study population, I do not probably know who actually has voted. If I have used this particular method, if I have just taken the voter list and have gone to anybody, that guy might not have voted, right? So the study and the target population become different. If the study and target population become different, then the models built on the training data may not give you a good result. Let me give you one more example. Suppose you have collected some particular training data, and on the basis of in the training data, suppose you have a number of variables. For simplicity, let's assume you have 4 or 5 variables. Now these 5 variables you have collected data, there is certain range and there is certain particular distribution. You fit the model and you try to predict using that. Now tomorrow when you are predicting on tomorrow's data. The tomorrow's data, tomorrow's feature space is your target. Yesterday's feature space was your study. Now you must ensure that the yesterday's feature space and tomorrow's feature space tally. If they do not, then you may walk into a bear trap. How will you take care of this? Look at the yesterday's feature space, find out the X variables, find out the distribution, find out the range. Do they match when you are looking tomorrow? Looking at the scenario tomorrow? If they do not match, you are at risk. So basically the idea is to be able to understand that you are building the model on a study population, but you really want to look at a target population. And there is a possibility that the study and the target population will be different. The better you understand and the better you are prepared with respect to this, the better will be your model.
Okay, thank you, sir. There is a question from Mr. PK.
Did it answer his question?
I hope so. Let's wait for his. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is one more question from Mr. PK. In which scales, interval or ratio, 0 point is considered? I'll pose the question.
Yeah, I got the point. In both interval and ratio scale, 0 is there. But in the case of interval scale, the 0 is arbitrary. 0 degree centigrade and 0 degree Fahrenheit are not same. It is arbitrary. If you take calendar date, this year is 2020. Now, if you subtract the number of years, if you subtract 2020 from the current year, it becomes 0. But that is not the starting point of time. That is not the 0 time. So, in these kinds of cases, your 0 is arbitrary 0, right? If you look at the Bengali calendar and if you look at the English calendar, you will find that the 0 is different. Whereas if you try to look at how many people have attended this session, 0 is well defined. So wherever 0 is well defined, you are having a ratio scale. When 0 is well defined, ratios make sense. When 0 is not well defined, ratios do not make sense. So for example, in Bengali calendar, it is some year, and in English calendar it is some year. You cannot take the ratio. That ratio doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully, this answered your question. Please let me know whether I am answering your questions or not. I can't see your faces.
Yeah, I request Mr. PK to please respond if your question is answered. Yeah, he says yes. Are there any more questions from the participants?
Okay, so you had enough of questions?
Yes, I think, sir, we have come to the end of this session.
Great.
So thank you very much, sir.
I should thank you. You have made the things happen very smoothly. I was quite apprehensive. I don't know whether people are understood or not. Please ask them to let you know whether they have understood or not, and if there is any way, I mean, anything that I need to do to make it better.
Sure.
Okay.
Would anybody from the participants like to share their feedback on the session?
Hi, this is Omkar here. Thank you, sir, for answering my question actually regarding this test data set. We would actually appreciate if you could have some more of these sessions. This was really insightful, and we have, we are working on many problems. We are working in environmental analytics, and some of my colleagues are working. I mean, they are not attending the session, but we would like to have your session again if I mean JMA can organize it.
Yeah, I think it looks like that I will be sitting at home for the next about 5-6 weeks. Looks like. So I don't mind teaching. I mean, I would like to take some some technical sessions actually. If you are interested, maybe we can have even a weekly session. I'll love to do that. So
yeah,
that will
we
be.
Could actually work. We could actually sir, work on some the actual data, real data that we are actually dealing with. And
that will be great. We can do that. I also have some data in different government and other contexts, which I mean, I look for volunteers to probably work together. So if you can do that, it will be great. It will be good learning, and we can do that. I'm sure Ashmita can chip in here, or maybe Amitabh can chip in here and tell us something. I can definitely take this thing, a few I mean sessions, technical sessions, and like that. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It was a really good presentation.
Pardon?
It was really good presentation.
So
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sir, this is Amitabh. We'll find, let us discuss internally, and we'll find some way to how the people can work on the data that you were talking about, or how you can clarify some of the application problems that people are facing in terms of the analytics, etc. I think we will come back to you shortly, sir, on this.
Sure. You please talk among yourselves, and if it is okay, then I can share some public data with you, and we can take maybe
definitely, sir, it will be
weekly. If we have a session, maybe 7-8 sessions, people also may benefit, and from a statistical perspective.
Definitely your guidance, and I think we will definitely get benefited. I will also take this opportunity to thank Satish. I think he coordinated with you and convinced you to take a session. I think Satish is in our team.
Prime mover. I mean, he requests. I mean, kudos. I mean, all thanks to him.
Yeah. I think we will have now more focused session.
It's Mrityunjay.
Pardon?
Yeah, Mrityunjay, carry on. I think Mrityunjay wants.
Hi, this is Mrityunjay. Am I audible? Hi.
Yes, very much good.
Sir, thank you very much. Very insightful. Very insightful. Sir, I think we can take one case of COVID-19 and what type of data analytics, because we see the reports and all these things. So this is a live case. Maybe we can build some models and all these things, because there is plenty of data now available.
COVID-19 is actually.
So for the next sessions, that's my suggestion.
We can do that. We should do it quickly in that case. And COVID-19 is actually a case where you have raised this point. It's really good. This is typically a case for level 1 analysis, not a model building case right now. Level 1 analysis.
So we see. Yes, so like exploratory data analytics, so we see a
How
lot of
you
good
can
analysis
do
using
data
R,
analytics
Python.
is
and all.
something that we can do. Yeah, I have done some. So we can definitely share that, and that will give you a very good idea about when you should use exploratory, when you should use explanatory, when you should use predictive. That will really give you very
Yes.
good. So take a few
Because
public
I think
interest.
yeah, this subject everyone knows, everyone is aware, and everyone is worried about
Yeah.
the outcome. So I think this will be quite good.
This will be quite good. Yeah, it will be quite
Thank you, sir.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks.
sir.
Okay, so thanks.
This is Amitabh again.
Yes, Amitabh.
Yeah, sir, just one point. I think as many of the analytics enthusiasts are connected on this session, I think if they have a problem which they want the guidance of the professor or they want to solve it in this COVID lockdown period, they can list it out and send it to Ashmita. Then we can pick and choose some of them and take professor's guidance as he is saying. And also, sir, what the problems that you were talking about on the government data, etc. If you can tell us to which are the problems, we can find some of the enthusiasts who are willing to work on that and go take forward.
Great, great, excellent. Yeah. Please do that. I'll write a mail.
And
Yeah.
sure, sir. Yeah, so Ashmita and Satish as is are the main center contact point for your side. And for all others participants, you can directly contact Ashmita on the mail, and then we can organize. And I, on behalf of JMA, sir, thank you once again for taking this
You're
session.
welcome.
I think we can continue. Thank you.
It was enjoyable. Actually, first time I'm giving an online lecture without seeing anybody, but it was good. And Amitabh and Smita, kindly share the PPT with all the participants.
Definitely, sir.
Sure,
I
sir.
have shared my email ID in the chat box. Please drop me a mail. And also the session will be recorded and will be shared on YouTube channel of JMA. I thank Professor Bandyopadhyay once again. Thank you, sir, for your time and wonderful presentation, and all the participants for your cooperation. So thank you. And for the upcoming events, please follow Jamshedpur Management Association on social media. Thank you, and see you in the next session.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye. See you.
Thank you. Bye, sir.
Bye.
Please like, share, and subscribe.
Maria, I have